80% of revenues are from your existing accounts. So how are you going to forecast growth without having account plans? Each of your major accounts needs projections that you can take to the bank, so to speak, so you have a baseline from which you're going to grow. Welcome to Driving Growth, the go-to-market podcast for traditional B2B businesses that are looking to build systems to create predictable revenue. In short, turning their company into a revenue factory. I'm your host, Steve Whittington, president of Roadmap and a believer in one simple truth. Sustainable growth is not an accident. It is engineered. And my company, Roadmap, is a builder of go-to-market systems. On today's show, we're diving deep into one of the most overlooked and undervalued levers in growth in B2B, account management. This is how you operationalize the other half of the bow tie, retention and expansion. Okay, let's start with what is account management and why does it matter if you're a B2B company? Well, account management is the deliberate post-sale discipline that builds relationships and unlocks and protects your revenue after you've acquired it. It's the bridge between, you've closed one and you're actually getting into dominating in your category. So if you're a software as a service company, account management is how you expand your seat sales or up the levels. If you're professional service, this is how you dig deep and you deepen the engagement and continue to strengthen your ongoing revenue with that client. If you're a manufacturer and you have a dealer network, this is how you activate them and you grow them. Account management is the key. If you think that account management is just support, like answering questions and providing quotes to your dealer network, that sort of thing, you're thinking far too small. It is the lever to growth. It is how you retain. It is how you expand your growth for your company. It is also how you maintain margin. It is how you get information back from the marketplace. It's how you learn to grow. It's one of the critical functions in your go-to-market system. At Roadmap, it's clear to us most of our revenue comes from retention. When I work with clients, most of their revenue comes from retention. So when we think of critical numbers that we start with at the beginning, we figure out what the customer acquisition cost is. We also want to know what your cost of retention is. And you got to make sure that you're resourcing both of those levers appropriately. Okay, so we've talked about how most of your long-term growth comes from your accounts when they're managed intentionally. How do you actually go about deciding which accounts that you need to manage, more so or less so? Well, in episode 5, we talked about customer profiles, determining your ideal client profile, ICP, and the personas and the different buyers committees within those stuff. Go back and listen. Good stuff there. We also talked about tiering your accounts so you could manage them with account management. And there's a couple ways to do it. I'm not going to get into the details, but essentially you can determine by revenue levels as to what your different accounts are. But what you want to think about is another framework is your tier 1 accounts. Those are your strategic accounts. Those are the ones that you get a good chunk of your revenue from. Your tier 2 are your growth accounts, and you want to sort of move them up to tier 1. They have potential to become tier 1 accounts. And your tier 3 are your passive or your transactional accounts. They kind of call you when they need you. They need a quote. They've got a customer that wants one of your units and that kind of stuff, but they're not actually actively engaged with you. They're passive or transactional accounts. So that's a good way to strategically think about the types of accounts that you have. Now, if you're a manufacturer with a dealer network, you're going to map these tiers to APRs, areas of prime responsibility. So you can see, hey, this is a tier 1 client in this APR. These dealers, your strategic dealers, they move serious volume. They're deeply engaged in your programs. They're using your co-op advertising. They're engaging in your training. And they get your time. They get your efforts. So they get your budget. And, you give them they get your first look. So like when somebody needs something, like end customer actually reaches out to you, you go to your strategic account because you know they're going to be taken care of. Your growth dealers, they're good, but they're not great. They're coming along. They require coaching to get them there. They require training. They require perhaps operational support. The potential is there, but this isn't automatic. They're not a strategic account yet. You got to grow them up. And so that's another way of doing it. Remember, you've got tier 1 strategic, tier 2 growth dealers. Now your underperformers or your passive or transactional accounts, they're sitting on market potential and they're potentially wasting it. So they could be somebody that has parked on an APR and they're not getting what you need out of that APR because they're treating you as a transactional or passive relationship. So you need to understand what your 3 tiers of dealers are doing, map to the APRs so you can see how they're tying up the territories. So the thing is, you don't want to just trust, your gut or how you feel about the deal. Like, oh, they're really great guys. We work well with them. We have great relationships. You want the data. You want the data that defines what your strategic account is. And so when you have that figured out, then you can map it to your APRs and you can look at, okay, we're growing in these areas. That's okay. And here's our underperforming APRs, and they tend to have those tier 3 dealers. And then you've got a decision to make. You coach them up or you coach them out. And that leads to the next thing that you need to do with account management. Are you coaching them up or are you coaching them out? You need to create strategic account plans that drive expansion for each of your strategic and your growth dealers and the APRs that you want growth in. Okay? This is forward-looking strategy. So when you think about it, how do you do this? Well, first you have to have your current baseline for that APR. What are you getting out of that territory? What's the current revenue? What's the products or services that they're providing? What's their satisfaction or their NPS with you? What's the satisfaction or NPS of the end customers that they may be serving in that area? So you get a baseline of what's going on in that APR that you can make an account plan from. And specifically, you really want to start thinking about what is their market share in that. What's the total addressable market that dealer has access to? And then what percent are they actually capturing so that you can do that as a baseline? Now, when you do that and you map that to your tier 1 dealers and you see, okay, our strategic accounts got this much market share as a percentage, that becomes a barometer for you to look at other APRs and you start to map it that way. So this is your starting point, getting this growth baseline in place. Now what you want to do is you want to define what success looks like for both you and them. Okay? Where do you and them want to go in this APR? You define goals for the account on how you're going to serve them to make them grow, to help them grow, right? So this is going to equal a revenue target for you, but it's also going to equal a growth target for them. So you're going to win together. So all this will lead to an activation plan, and the activation plan will be, beyond how do you grow by 20%? You're adding new product lines. Are you maybe expanding into a neighboring APR? How are you going to improve profitability? How are you going to sell with a higher margin? All that sort of stuff is all going to be in your activation plan, which includes that you're going to give them some PK, product knowledge training. You maybe participate in some marketing, leverage co-op dollars, start to do some co-op marketing together or marketing initiatives together in the APR. Maybe there's an event, maybe there's a pilot. You build that all into the plan for that APR with that dealer, that account management plan. And this is very collaborative, and everybody now knows what the goals are. And you're not selling these goals, you're co-creating it, and then you're going to be managing it and implementing it together. Now, on top of all this, when you do all this kind of stuff, you start to look at this. You need to really think about, okay, well, I've got my future goals that I've done, and I've mapped out stuff, and I can see what I want on a per APR basis and that kind of stuff. And you start to see what your strategic accounts are. You start to see what your growth accounts are. And of course, you've got the transactional accounts or, the ones that are just, they just sort of pull from you whenever. And those are your tier 3s. So that starts to identify gaps. right? And then when you start to look at it, and even perhaps with your strategic accounts, there might be some frictions in the relationship. So you want to identify that. Maybe there's some unmet needs that they have. When you're doing this plan, it's like, how can we help you? Well, if you did this, we'd be able to grow more. And this whole account awareness benefits the relationship that you have as a manufacturer or as a B2B business that's selling to an account. So you really want to ask these questions to find out how you're maybe not meeting certain things, what more you can do, and identify these gaps. Hey, before we get much further in this episode, I wanted to tell you about the first ratios I run when I work with CEOs, CFOs, vice presidents of marketing, vice president of sales. We work together to determine the cost of growth, your customer acquisition cost, and your cost of retention. Those are what I call the first ratios. Now, if you would like to take 30 minutes and work them out with me, back of the napkin to give you a good idea of what your cost of growth is and what your true cost of retention is, book me at weareroadmap.com, and in 30 minutes, you will have that clarity. Now, let's get back to the show. This gets into the next thing when you're doing your account management is your expansion plays. So what are the cross-sell and upsell opportunities? And this is not it doesn't matter if it's a dealer network you're selling to or it's end businesses that you're selling to as a traditional B2B. There's always going to be upsell or cross-sell opportunities if you've got a plan in place with them where you've sat down and said, okay, what's happening for 2026? What are your goals? How do we support you in that? Here's some of the things we can do to help you get there. Okay. And then you've got opportunities where you can introduce like service bundles, or you have booking programs. There's all kinds of things that you can get that stuff in front of them ahead of time. Arguably, if you're going to be doing effective account management, you should be planting the seeds for the next year, at least halfway through the current year, just continuing to build on that momentum. And when you get specific on this, that's where you can start to say, well, what else can we do to support you in this area? And again, with a dealer network, you look at all those other levers that we talked about. Can we bring a new product line in? Should we do a launch on that? That sort of stuff. So that expansion is a critical thing that you want to think about when you're creating an account plan. And now to back up. That's all great. We've done this account plan, all that stuff. But, if referring back to episode 5, talking about your ideal client profile and the personas, this is where it gets really important. People miss this point, is you need to do a stakeholder map. You need to understand who the primary contact is at the account. So, who's the CEO, who controls the budget. It could be a VP of finance. Who influences decisions, either are in the room or not in the room. So you could be dealing with a VP of sales or a sales manager or a marketing manager, or it could be an operations person. And you need to make sure that you map out how all those people interact with what you're doing on their account and where they play. The president could just literally come in and rubber stamp things. Or they could be like a final piece that you have to approve every year to get things across the line. You need to know the roles that they play. And that's buyer committee that I talked about in episode 5. But it's like, for your account, you have to have that stakeholder map in place to understand all the different players that are involved. Okay. And quite frankly, a missed stakeholder could equal a missed sale. So this putting this together, having that buyer's committee, having that stakeholder map as part of your account plan, that helps you close that gap. That helps you make sure that you don't miss any sales. And so the overall building of an account plan doesn't just increase revenue, it increases strategic clarity for you and your customer. They know where they're going to go with you next year, and you know where you're going to go with them next year. Okay, lots of good stuff. We say, okay, that's great. This is how we create the plan. We go through current state, we have future state, we have gaps, we have an activation plan, we have the stakeholders mapped, we think about expansion, all that stuff. That's all got put into a plan. And at the end of the day, we have goals from revenue, different types of initiatives you're going to be doing with the plan, say product knowledge training or bundling. All that stuff is put together. Awesome. Plans can just live on a shelf and die. So how How do you operationalize this stuff? How do you actually get this to be something that is part of your way of being and everybody is doing it, and you don't just have a few hero salespeople out there that are knocking things out of the park? This is something that this is how you show up. This is how you do business. It becomes part of your sales operations. So first and foremost, you have to have clear ownership on the accounts. You can't share accounts. There's got to be one person responsible, right? You need a CRM. I'm going to die on this hill. You have to have a CRM that can capture everything so that all points of contact from your company to your customer are recorded and you can see what's going on. This could be service tickets. This could be orders. This could be requests on shipping, all kinds of stuff, all there so you have clarity and visibility as to what's happening. You have to have a defined cadence for account management, monthly check-ins, quarterly business reviews, that sort of stuff, reporting on when you actually get back to them with how they're doing against the plan, how they're doing with their different initiatives, how they're doing, say, on projects that you're initiating. If you're a professional service firm, you have to have a defined cadence. And best case is you actually have a dashboard that shows how you're trending towards your goals. So this is literally APR level insights. If you're a manufacturer with a dealer group, you can sit there and say, in this APR, this is what we get. Or you can have account level insights. When you have your accounts tiered, you can see what are the categories, what are the characteristics that make your strategic accounts, your growth accounts, and your transactional accounts. With all this in place, with operationalizing your account management, you will be able to see account performance versus potential of where it could be or should be. Program participation. If you're selling products, you'll have product penetration, and you can start to see how you're actually growing the account, and you can have like pipeline expansion that's occurring. All that will become visible with an account plan that is operationalized in a CRM with the goals in place, everything documented as to what has to happen, and conducting regular quarterly business reviews. So we at Roadmap, we coach a lot of different manufacturers and a lot of different professional service firms how they can actually go about treating underperforming accounts, underperforming APRs. And that's where you have basically revenue leakage, is in those two areas. So underperforming accounts tend to be over-resourced, so they're taking your time and attention. And then underperforming APRs are you're losing opportunity. So those two things have to be identified and shored up pretty quickly for you to be able to get to where your growth goals are. Okay, you have probably heard the acronym QBR. Everybody throws it around a lot. Quarterly Business Review. It arguably is one of the most powerful tools in the tool belt of account management. Now, keep in mind, you have the plan, you have the data, you have measurements against it, you have all those other baseline fundamentals in place so you can do this. But with the quarterly business review, when you're going through that, when you're going through your plan, what are you really doing? Trust is being reinforced. You created a plan together and you're executing together and you're trending towards what your goals are. So trust is reinforced in the relationship. Alignment is recalibrated or continues to be, reinforced. That is another thing that the quarterly business review does. And then growth continues to be reviewed and enhanced or negotiated or understood what's actually happening with that account. So let's break this down. So when you do a quarterly business review, you may have some underperforming accounts or stuff that's just missing. So specifically, with a dealer network, you could have underperforming dealers. Don't avoid them. Don't sugarcoat the data. Don't not, present it. Go through it, present the gap, ask the hard questions. What's going on with your volume? Why are you not participating in certain types of programs? What support do you need to get you where we talked about going? Is there a lack of alignment in the relationship? Has there been shifts in the marketplace? All this kind of stuff. This is where you get valuable customer feedback and customer understanding and clarity on the dealers that work and don't work. If you're selling to accounts, again, the quarterly business review, if you're missing certain things, hey, we had talked about doing this project and we're not doing that now. What's changed? What's going on? All this stuff is important that you continue to understand your customer and understanding what's going on in their world so you can align goals together. Your top folks, they're your ambassadors. They're the ones that you want to put in, is get testimonials to help you grow. They can even help you onboard other customers. You can use them in case studies. They can be testing new products or new services. You can invite them to your advisory board, your customer council, all that sort of stuff. There's lots of things that when you're doing this quarterly business review, that this kind of opportunity starts to pop up. And you can make loyalty a growth multiplier with those folks. You can reward, with access, visibility, and input into your business because they're a driver, and then helps them grow their business. So there's lots of things that this does, and it reinforces success, of course. But again, comes back down to if they're very successful, trust is reinforced, alignment is recalibrated, growth is negotiated. All this stuff. Now, the ones in between that are kind of not hitting it out of the park and not clearly missing, again, you realign the goals. You talk about new things that you can do together. So you launch new ways to actually grow. You review progress against the plan, and then you say, okay, well, this is where we hit, this is where we missed. What else can we do? And you look at the quick wins and you build momentum. And it's a critical action to do. So the best QBRs aren't just like an action that's run by your account manager. It's your account manager leads them like a GM of growth. This is like, hey, this is our opportunity to grow together. Let's go through this. Let's review our successes, or let's review our misses so we can figure out how we can do it. If there's an obstacle to growth, let's figure out how to get through it. Okay, so this is what we've covered. Account management isn't optional if you're a B2B company. This is a core growth function. And why is the core of your revenues, often 80% of revenues are from your existing accounts. So how are you going to forecast growth without having account plans? Each of your major accounts needs projections that you can take to the bank, so to speak, so you have a baseline from which you're going to grow. This is critical for creating your forecasts for the future. So you have your accounts, which are the basis of your business, and you have accurately forecasted what your accounts do because they are tiered. And tiering brings you focus. It tells you who you need to focus on. So if you have your strategic accounts that represent 60% of your revenue because you forecasted that, that's what they do, that's where you need to focus. Okay, and if you have your growth accounts that are the other 20% of your revenue for the baseline, and you can say, geez, I could grow them up to be 40%, that's where you need to focus, or you need to make sure it's resourced appropriately, right? Tiering brings focus from the account management, from the account plan. Your plans then turn all the noise of the day, right? Like your hope casting, I hope we get this out of this kind of stuff. It turns it into strategy with tactics. You say, hey, here's what our goal is. Here's how we're going to achieve it. Here's the products that we need to sell to them, that sort of stuff. Here's our top tiers. You have a plan that is strategic, that focuses you on what you need to do. And then you have the systems in place that make this repeatable. So you know that you have to check in with them monthly. You know you have to check in with them quarterly. By each tier, there's certain things that you have to do. You have this plan that you're following on an annual basis as an account manager to make things happen. And that is where it becomes accountable. QBRs, quarterly business reviews, they make your plan accountable. So account management isn't optional. Tiering brings focus. Strategic account plans turn noise into strategy. Systems make it repeatable, and QBRs make it accountable. There is a ton of growth hidden and locked within your existing accounts. Make plans, go after it, go get it. If you like what you've heard, go to weareroadmap.com/podcast and download the Revenue Factory Toolkit, in which you will receive mathematical models and framework for building your go-to-market system. Also, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes dropping the first and third Wednesday of every month. I'm Steve Whittington. Thanks for listening. Keep building your revenue factory one brick at a time.